Millionaire CEO watched a woman buy the last bus ticket for an elderly woman, then walk home quietly. Sarah Bennett had nothing left but her integrity. When she gave away her last bus ticket to a stranger in need, she had no idea that one small act of kindness would shatter the walls she'd built around her broken heart and change two lives forever. But the man watching from the shadows wasn't who she thought he was, and what he was about to do would test everything she believed about second chances, forgiveness, and the true meaning of family. This is a story about a mother's sacrifice, a child's hope, and a twist of fate that proves sometimes our darkest moments lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Sarah Bennett stood at the Greyhound station ticket counter, her hands trembling as she counted the crumpled bills one more time. $23.47. The ticket to Portland cost $22.50. That left her with 97 cents for the next 3 days until her paycheck from the diner cleared. Her daughter Emma tugged at her worn coat sleeve. "Mama, I'm hungry." Sarah's heart twisted. "I know, baby. We'll get something when we get to Aunt Linda's, okay?" 7 years old, and Emma had already learned not to ask twice. Sarah hated that her bright, beautiful girl had learned to swallow her needs, to make herself small, to understand that sometimes there just wasn't enough. It had been 8 months since David left. 8 months since she'd come home early from her shift at Morrison's Diner to find the apartment empty except for a note on the kitchen counter. "I can't do this anymore." The rent had been due in 3 days. The checking account had $62 in it, and Sarah had been 4 months pregnant with their second child, a pregnancy that ended in heartbreak 2 weeks later when her body, stressed and depleted, simply gave up. She'd lost everything in the span of a month: her husband, her unborn baby, her apartment, and very nearly her will to keep going. Only Emma's face, that trusting, hopeful face, kept her moving forward. "Next," the ticket agent called. Sarah stepped forward and slid her money across the counter. "1 adult, 1 child to Portland, please." The agent counted the bills and punched keys on her computer. "That'll be $22.50 for you. $11.25 for the child. Total $33.75. Sarah's stomach dropped. I thought children were free?" "Under 5, ma'am. Your daughter looks about 7. She just turned 7 last month." Sarah's voice cracked. "I only have $23. The agent's expression softened but remained firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't change the fare." Behind her, Sarah heard the shuffling of impatient travelers. Her face burned with shame. Emma pressed against her leg, sensing something was wrong. Maybe I could work something out? A payment plan or..." "Ma'am, this is Greyhound, not a layaway store. You either have the fare or you don't." Sarah felt her eyes sting. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of Emma, in front of these strangers. "Okay, thank you." She gathered her money and stepped aside, her mind racing. They couldn't stay another night in River City. The weekly motel room had already consumed most of her last paycheck. Aunt Linda in Portland was their only family, their only chance at getting back on their feet. But how could they get there? Sarah led Emma to a bench in the corner of the station and sat down heavily. Through the large windows, she could see the last bus to Portland idling at the platform. It would leave in 20 minutes. "Mama?" Emma's voice was small. "Are we going to see Aunt Linda?" Sarah pulled her daughter close, breathing in the strawberry scent of the cheap shampoo from the motel. "We're going to figure it out, sweetheart. Mama always figures it out." But even as she said it, she didn't know if it was true anymore. Across the station, an elderly woman struggled with a heavy suitcase, trying to drag it toward the ticket counter. She looked about 75, with silver hair and a cardigan that had seen better days. Her face was etched with deep lines of worry as she paused to catch her breath. One hand pressed to her chest. Sarah watched her for a moment, then made a decision she couldn't afford to make. "Stay here, baby. I'll be right back." She approached the elderly woman. "Ma'am, can I help you with that?" The woman looked up, relief flooding her face. "Oh, bless you, dear. My grandson was supposed to drive me to the station, but his car broke down. I had to take a cab and the driver just left me here." Sarah lifted the suitcase, surprisingly heavy, and carried it to the ticket counter. The woman followed, moving slowly. "Where are you headed?" Sarah asked. "Portland. My daughter just had surgery. She needs me." The woman's voice wavered. "I'm all she has. Something in those words pierced Sarah's heart. I'm all she has. She thought of Emma waiting on the bench. She thought of being someone's only hope. At the counter, the woman opened her purse and began counting change. Quarters, dimes, nickels. The pile grew slowly. The agent waited with visible impatience. $33.75, the agent said flatly. The woman's hand shook as she recounted her money. I have $28.17. Then you're short $5.58, ma'am. The woman's face crumpled. But I have to get to Portland. My daughter, she's alone in the hospital. She doesn't have anyone else. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. She looked back at Emma, who waved at her with her stuffed rabbit. She looked at her own money, clutched in her hand. $23.47. Enough for her ticket, not enough for both of them. She thought about her own mother, who died of cancer when Sarah was 23, how she would have given anything for one more day with her, one more chance to tell her she loved her. Sarah didn't think. Thinking would have stopped her. She simply pulled out her money and placed it on the counter next to the elderly woman's pile. Here, this should cover it. The woman turned to her, eyes wide. Oh no, dear, I couldn't. Please, Sarah said quietly. Your daughter needs you. Take it. The agent counted the combined money and nodded. She printed the ticket and handed it to the elderly woman, who clutched it to her chest as tears rolled down her weathered cheeks. How can I ever thank you? The woman whispered. You don't have to. Just be there for your daughter. Sarah managed to smile. That's what mothers do. The woman embraced her tightly, smelling of lavender and peppermint. God bless you, dear. What's your name? Sarah. Sarah Bennett. I'm Margaret Reeves. I won't forget this, Sarah. I won't forget you. Sarah helped her onto the bus with her luggage, then walked slowly back to where Emma waited. Her daughter looked up at her with those trusting brown eyes. Are we getting on the bus now, Mama? Sarah sat down and pulled Emma onto her lap. Not tonight, baby. We're going to stay one more night and catch your bus tomorrow. It was a lie, but a necessary one. Tomorrow they'd figure something else out. Maybe she could pick up an extra shift. Maybe there'd be a miracle. Through the window, she watched the Portland bus pull away from the platform. Margaret Reeves's face appeared in one of the windows, pressing her hand against the glass and mouthing, "Thank you, one more time." Sarah waved back, then gathered Emma and their few belongings. The night was cold and they had nowhere to go but back to the motel if the manager would let them have one more night despite being unable to pay. She didn't notice the man in the expensive charcoal suit who had been standing near the vending machines watching everything unfold. She didn't see him pull out his phone and make a quiet call. She didn't know that he had watched her give away her last chance at escape to help a stranger. She didn't know that everything was about to change. The Sunset Motel lived up to its name only in the most ironic sense. It was where dreams went to die in the fading light. Room 7 smelled of mildew and old cigarette smoke despite the no smoking sign peeling off the door. But it was $35 a night, which made it the cheapest roof Sarah could find in River City. She sat on the edge of the sagging bed watching Emma sleep. Her daughter had cried herself to sleep after the happy meal Sarah couldn't afford, settling instead for the sleeve of crackers from the gas station that cost $1.19. Emma had eaten 4 crackers and insisted she was full, saving the rest for tomorrow. 7 years old and already learning to ration food. Sarah felt like the worst mother in the world. Her phone buzzed a text from the diner manager. Sorry, Sarah, had to cut your Tuesday shift. Business is slow. We'll let you know about next week. That was it. Her last shift gone. She did the math in her head for the 100th time. 97 cents in her pocket, maybe $4 and change in the bottom of her backpack. No shift until Thursday, if she even still had one. The motel room paid through tonight only. She couldn't sell the car, she'd already lost it 3 months ago when she couldn't make the payments. Couldn't pawn anything. She had nothing left of value except her mother's wedding ring, and that was the one thing she'd sworn never to part with. Sarah opened her backpack and pulled out her journal, a habit she'd kept since high school. Writing helped her think, helped her process. She opened to a blank page and wrote, options. Then she stared at the empty space below that single word for 10 minutes because there were no options. Not one she could live with anyway. She could call Aunt Linda, beg her to wire money for bus tickets. But Linda was barely scraping by herself on disability checks, living in a tiny studio apartment. Sarah had already asked too much. She could go to a shelter. But the family shelter had a waiting list 2 weeks long, and they'd have to sleep there together in a room with strangers, with Emma exposed to who knows what. She could, what? What else was there? Sarah put her head in her hands and finally let herself cry. Quiet sobs that shook her shoulders but made no sound. She'd become an expert at crying silently these past 8 months. A knock at the door made her jump. Sarah wiped her eyes quickly and checked the digital clock. 11:47 p.m. Who would be knocking this late? The motel manager, probably, coming to tell her she had to leave in the morning if she couldn't pay for another night. She considered not answering, but the knock came again, more insistent. "Just a minute," she called softly, checking that Emma was still asleep. Sarah opened the door a crack, keeping the chain lock engaged. A man stood there, tall, maybe mid-50s, with gray streaking his dark hair. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than she'd made in the last 3 months. His expression was serious, but not unkind. "Sarah Bennett?" he asked. Her stomach dropped. "Collection agency? Process server? Who's asking?" "My name is Richard Coleman. I was at the bus station earlier tonight. I saw what you did for Margaret Reeves." Sarah's mind raced. "I don't want any trouble. I gave her money willingly. She didn't ask for it." "I know. That's why I'm here." He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "May I come in?" "I promise I mean you no harm. I have something important to discuss with you." Every instinct told Sarah not to let a strange man into her motel room at midnight, but something about his demeanor, calm, professional, almost grandfatherly, made her hesitate. "How did you find me? I followed you here earlier. I'm sorry if that sounds alarming, but I needed to know where to find you." "Why? What do you want?" Richard Coleman reached into his jacket pocket slowly, pulling out a business card. He passed it through the crack in the door. Sarah took it. "Richard Coleman, CEO, Coleman Industries." Her hands trembled as she held the card. Coleman Industries. Even she knew that name. They manufactured medical equipment, one of the largest companies in the region. "Mrs. Bennett, what you did tonight was extraordinary. In my position, I see a lot of people. Most of them are looking for something from me. But you gave away your last dollars to help a complete stranger get to her daughter. You sacrificed your own chance to escape your situation for someone else's need. That kind of character is rare." Sarah's throat tightened. "I still don't understand why you're here. Because I'd like to offer you a job." The words hung in the air between them. Sarah almost laughed. It seemed so absurd. "A job?" "Yes. My executive assistant is retiring at the end of the month. The position pays $65,000 a year, full benefits, including health insurance and a child care subsidy. I've reviewed what I could learn about your background. You worked in office administration before your daughter was born. You're organized, reliable, and most importantly, you have integrity. That's worth more than any credential." Sarah felt dizzy. This had to be a joke or a scam. Men in expensive suits didn't show up at midnight offering jobs that paid more than she'd ever made in her life. This isn't real. This doesn't happen in real life." "I assure you, it does. Not often, but it does." Richard's expression softened. "Mrs. Bennett, I built my company on the principle that character matters more than pedigree. 28 years ago, I was working 3 jobs to support my mother after my father died. Someone gave me a chance I didn't deserve. Not on paper, anyway. He saw something in me beyond my resume. That chance changed my life. I've spent my career trying to pay that forward." Sarah's mind reeled. "Why me? Why not someone more qualified?" "Because you passed a test tonight that no interview could measure. When you gave Margaret Reeves your last money, you didn't know anyone was watching. You didn't do it for recognition or reward. You did it because it was right, even though it cost you dearly. That tells me everything I need to know about the kind of person you are." Through the gap in the door, Sarah saw Emma stir on the bed, rolling over with her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. "I have a daughter," Sarah whispered. "She's all I have. I can't take risks with her life. How do I know this is legitimate?" "Fair question." Richard pulled out his phone and showed her a web page. Coleman Industries' official site, with his photo prominently displayed as CEO. Here's my direct office number. Call tomorrow morning and ask for me. My secretary will confirm everything I've told you tonight. I'll have a formal offer letter prepared. You can have your lawyer review it if you'd like. I don't have a lawyer. Then I'll pay for one to review it for you. Mrs. Bennett, I'm not asking you to trust me blindly. I'm asking you to consider this opportunity carefully and make a decision based on facts. Sarah looked down at the business card in her hand, then back at this strange man who claimed to be offering her a lifeline. There has to be a catch. No catch. But I will be honest about what the job requires. You'll work long hours sometimes. You'll need to be available for occasional travel. You'll handle sensitive information and major responsibilities. It won't be easy, but I believe you're capable of it. When would I start? Monday. That gives you 5 days to find housing. I have a list of apartment complexes near the office that offer move-in specials. I'll advance you your first month's salary so you can secure a place and get settled. Sarah's legs felt weak. She gripped the doorframe. This doesn't make sense. You don't know me. I know enough, and I trust my instincts. Richard handed another card through the gap, this one with a name and number written on the back. That's the number for Jennifer Martinez. She's a social worker who helps families in crisis. Call her tomorrow. She can connect you with resources to get you through the next few days until you start. Sarah stared at the card, tears blurring her vision. Why are you doing this? Richard was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Because 28 years ago, I stood exactly where you're standing. Broke, desperate, trying to be strong for someone who depended on me. And someone really saw me and gave me a chance. It saved my life. I swore if I ever had the power to do the same for someone else, I would. Tonight, I saw you, and I'm giving you that chance. He stepped back from the door. Get some rest, Mrs. Bennett. Call my office in the morning. We'll go from there. Sarah watched him walk away across the motel parking lot to a silver Mercedes. He got in and drove away without looking back. She closed the door and stood there in the darkness, holding 2 business cards and trying to understand what had just happened. Behind her, Emma's sleepy voice came from the bed. Mama, who was that man? Sarah turned to see her daughter sitting up, rubbing her eyes. I think, Sarah's voice broke, I think he might have been an angel baby. She climbed onto the bed and held Emma close, both of them crying now, but for the first time in 8 months. Sarah's tears weren't from despair. They were tears of hope. Sarah stood in front of Coleman Industries headquarters on Monday morning at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes early, holding Emma's hand and trying to breathe normally. The building was 15 stories of glass and steel, reflecting the morning sun like a beacon. She'd walked past it 100 times on her way to the diner, never imagining she'd step through its doors as an employee. The weekend had been a blur. She'd called Richard Coleman's office Friday morning, half expecting it to be a disconnected number or a fake voicemail. Instead, a professional receptionist answered. Coleman Industries, how may I direct your call? I'm calling for Richard Coleman. My name is Sarah Bennett. Oh yes, Ms. Bennett. Mr. Bennett. Coleman is expecting your call. Please hold. 30 seconds later, Richard's voice came on the line. Good morning, Sarah. I hope you've had time to think about my offer. They talked for 40 minutes. He'd sent over the formal offer letter by email. $65,000 annually, full benefits starting day 1, child care subsidy of up to $800 a month, 2 weeks paid vacation, sick leave, and a signing bonus of $3,000 to help with immediate expenses. Sarah had read it 17 times, searching for the catch. There wasn't one. She'd used part of the advance to pay for 3 more nights at the motel while she searched for an apartment. Jennifer Martinez, the social worker Richard recommended, had connected her with an accelerated rental assistance program. By Sunday afternoon, Sarah had signed a lease on a small 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood, close to a good elementary school for Emma. It felt like someone else's life, like she'd wake up any moment back in the motel room with 97 cents and no prospects. But here she was, and it was real. Ready, baby? She asked Emma. Her daughter squeezed her hand. You look pretty. Mama. Sarah was wearing the one professional outfit she'd managed to salvage from their old life black pants and a white blouse that she'd washed in the motel sink and ironed with a towel and a hair. straightener, not perfect, but presentable. They walked through the revolving doors into a lobby that seemed to belong to a different universe. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, abstract art on the walls. A security guard at the desk smiled at them. "Good morning. How can I help you?" "I'm Sarah Bennett. It's my first day. I'm supposed to report to Mr. Coleman's office." The guard checked his computer and nodded. "Welcome, Ms. Bennett. You'll need a security badge. I'll get that processed for you. Mr. Coleman's office is on the 15th floor. Take the elevators on the left." As they rode up in the glass elevator, Emma pressed her face to the glass, watching the lobby shrink below them. "Mama, we're so high." "I know, sweetheart. Pretty cool, right?" The elevator opened onto a reception area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. A woman in her 60s with kind eyes and perfectly styled silver hair stood from behind the large desk. "You must be Sarah. I'm Dorothy Chen, Mr. Coleman's secretary. We're so glad you're here." She smiled at Emma. "And who's this beautiful girl?" "This is my daughter, Emma." "Hello, Emma. I hear you're going to be visiting our child care center today. Would you like to see it?" Emma looked up at Sarah uncertainly. The original plan had been for Emma to start at the public elementary school on Tuesday, but Richard had insisted Emma spend her first day at Coleman Industries as on-site childcare facility so Sarah wouldn't have to worry about her. "It's okay, baby," Sarah said. "Remember what we talked about. You'll spend the day with other kids and Mama will be right upstairs working. I'll come visit you at lunch." Dorothy came around the desk and offered her hand to Emma. "I have a granddaughter about your age. The child care center has a reading corner with lots of books. Do you like to read?" Emma nodded shyly. "I like fairy tales." "Well, you're in luck. Come on. I'll introduce you to Ms. Patricia. She's wonderful." Sarah knelt down and hugged Emma tight. "Be good, okay? I love you too, Mama. I love you too, Mama." She watched Dorothy lead Emma down the hall, forcing herself not to cry. This was good. This was an opportunity. Emma would be safe and happy. Ms. would be safe and happy. "Bennett?" Sarah turned to see Richard Coleman emerging from a large office. He wore a navy suit and smiled warmly. "Good morning. Right on time. Come in, let's get you oriented." His office was massive with windows on 2 walls and a sitting area with leather furniture. But what struck Sarah most was how lived in it felt. Family photos on the credenza, bookshelves filled with worn paperbacks alongside business texts, a coffee maker that had clearly seen heavy use. "First things first," Richard said, gesturing to a chair. "How are you? How did the apartment search go?" "I thank you for everything. I signed a lease yesterday. We can move in Wednesday." "Excellent. Now, I want to be clear about something before we begin." Richard sat across from her, his expression serious. "You're going to face some challenges here. Some people will wonder why I hired someone without a traditional executive assistant background. There may be skepticism or even resentment. Your job is to prove them wrong, not through words, but through consistent, excellent work." Sarah nodded, her stomach tightening with nerves. "I don't expect you to know everything on day one," Richard continued, "but I do expect you to learn quickly, ask questions when you're unsure, and maintain the highest standards of discretion and integrity. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." "Then let's get started." He stood and moved to his desk, pulling out a thick binder. "This is your operations manual. It covers everything from how I like my schedule managed to protocols for handling sensitive documents. Dorothy will be training you for the next 2 weeks before she retires. She's been with me for 18 years. There's nothing she doesn't know about running this office." For the next 6 hours, Sarah absorbed more information than she thought her brain could hold. How to manage Richard's calendar across 3 time zones, how to screen his calls and emails, how to prepare briefing documents for board meetings, how to coordinate with department heads and external partners, how to handle confidential financial information. Dorothy was patient and thorough, walking Sarah through every system and process. But by lunchtime, Sarah's head was spinning. "It's a lot, I know," Dorothy said kindly as they broke for lunch. "But you'll get it. I've seen Mr. Coleman hire a lot of assistants over the years. His instincts about people are rarely wrong." Sarah went down to the child care center to check on Emma, half expecting her daughter to be miserable. Instead, she found Emma sitting in a reading circle with 6 other children, completely engrossed in a story about dragons and princesses. "Mama." Emma ran over and hugged her. "Ms. Mama, Patricia let me pick the story. And we had goldfish crackers for snack, and I made a friend named Sophie. Sarah's heart swelled. That's wonderful, baby. Are you okay here? Do you want to stay for the afternoon? Can I? Sophie said they're going to paint after quiet time. Of course you can. Sarah kissed her forehead. I'll come get you at 5 o'clock. She returned to the 15th floor feeling lighter. Emma was happy. They had a future. Everything was going to be okay. But at 2:30 p.m., Dorothy received an urgent call. Mr. Coleman needs you in the conference room immediately. Senator Whitmore is here for the 3 o'clock meeting, but he arrived early and the presentation materials aren't ready. Sarah's blood turned to ice. What presentation materials? The quarterly report briefing. It's in Section 7 of the Operations Manual. You need to print 12 copies, collated and bound, with the financial spreadsheets in the appendix. Sarah's hands shook as she opened the manual. Section 7. Find the file on the shared drive. Open it. Print setup. 12 copies. Collated. Bound. The printer jammed on page 3. Sarah's heart hammered as she unjammed it, restarted the print job. The printer showed 2 minutes remaining. It was 2056 p.m. She ran the copies to the copy room, used the binding machine, which she'd only learned about 4 hours ago, and prayed she was doing it right. 2059 p.m. Sarah sprinted down the hall as much as one could sprint in a professional office and burst into the conference room at exactly 300 p.m., slightly out of breath, holding 12 perfectly bound presentation packets. Richard looked up from his conversation with an older gentleman in a suit. Senator Whitmore, presumably. Ah, perfect timing. Sarah, thank you. Everyone. This is Sarah Bennett, my new executive assistant. The senator nodded politely. Richard's expression betrayed nothing, but as Sarah distributed the packets around the conference table, he caught her eye for just a moment and winked. She'd passed her first test. 3 weeks into her new job, Sarah was beginning to believe it might actually work out. She'd moved into the apartment with Emma. It wasn't fancy 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen smaller than her old closet. But it was clean, safe, and theirs. No more motel rooms, no more wondering where they'd sleep. Emma had started at Wilson Elementary and loved it. She'd made 3 friends already and talked endlessly about her teacher, Mrs. Budd Rodriguez, who let the kids pick books from her personal library to take home on weekends. At work, Sarah was finding her rhythm. Dorothy had officially retired last Friday, sending Sarah off with a hug and the words, "You're going to be wonderful. Trust yourself." The job was demanding, but Sarah thrived on it. She liked the structure, the sense of purpose, the feeling of competence that came from mastering complex systems. Richard was a demanding boss but fair, and he'd been nothing but supportive as she'd settled into the role. On this particular Thursday afternoon, Sarah was eating lunch in the company cafeteria, a bright, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. She'd just bitten into her sandwich when someone approached her table. "Excuse me, Sarah." "Sarah Bennett?" Sarah looked up and nearly dropped her sandwich. Margaret Reeves stood there, looking healthier and more vibrant than she had at the bus station, wearing a visitor's badge and clutching a purse to her chest. "Mrs. Reeves," Sarah stood quickly. What are you doing here?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "I've been trying to find you for 3 weeks. I went back to the bus station, but they wouldn't give me any information. I called every Sarah Bennett in the phone book. I was about to give up when someone told me you might work here. I didn't believe it, but I thought I'd try anyway." She gestured at the cafeteria. "The receptionist said you might be at lunch, so I came looking for you." Sarah came around the table and hugged the older woman. "How is your daughter? Is she okay?" "She's wonderful. The surgery was successful. She's recovering beautifully." Margaret pulled back, holding Sarah's hands. "Because of you, I was there with her through it all. The doctor said my presence made all the difference in her recovery. She wasn't alone. I'm so glad. But you," Margaret shook her head in wonder, "you gave me your last money. You gave up your chance to escape whatever situation you were in. For a complete stranger, I've thought about you every single day. I prayed for you. I hope somehow, somewhere, you'd be okay." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm more than okay. Honestly, I still can't believe what's happened. Tell me everything." They sat down together, and Sarah shared the whole story. The motel, Richard Coleman, the job offer, the apartment, Emma's new school. Margaret listened with rapt attention, occasionally wiping away tears. "That man who offered you the job," Margaret said slowly. "Richard Coleman. He was at the bus station that night." "Yes, he saw what happened and followed me to find out where I was staying." Margaret was quiet for a long moment, an odd expression on her face. "Sarah, did Mr. Coleman tell you why he was at the station that night?" "No, actually, I never thought to ask. My daughter's name is Elizabeth Coleman. She's Richard Coleman's daughter." Sarah's mouth fell open. "What?" "Richard is my son-in-law. He was at the station that night because he was supposed to pick me up, but there was a crisis at the company and he got delayed. He called to tell me to take a cab, but I didn't have quite enough money for the fare and the bus ticket both." Margaret gripped Sarah's hand tighter. "He got there just as I was boarding the bus. He saw the whole thing. He saw you give me your last dollars to help me get to his wife." Sarah's mind reeled. "He never said anything. He never told me you were his family." "That's Richard. He never wants credit for his kindness. He spent his whole career quietly helping people behind the scenes." Margaret's eyes shone with emotion. "But Sarah, don't you see? You didn't just help a stranger that night. You helped my daughter's mother get to her bedside when she needed me most. You gave Elizabeth the gift of not being alone in her fear and pain, and in doing so you showed Richard exactly the kind of person you are." Sarah felt dizzy. All this time she'd thought it was random chance, but it had been personal for Richard all along. "Does he know you're here?" Sarah asked. "Not yet, but I have a feeling he'll be pleased." Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "This is the money you gave me that night, plus a little extra as interest. I've been carrying it with me, hoping to find you." Sarah pushed the envelope back gently. "I can't take that. I didn't help you for money." "I know you didn't. That's exactly why you must take it." Margaret pressed it into Sarah's hands. "Please, let me have the dignity of repaying a debt. You were there for me in my moment of desperate need. Let me honor that." Sarah opened the envelope and gasped. It contained $500. "Mrs. Reeves, this is too much. It's not nearly enough for what you did, but it's what I can give." Margaret stood. "I should let you finish your lunch. But Sarah, I want you to know something. That night at the bus station, when you gave me your money, you didn't just save my trip to Portland. You saved my faith in human goodness. After everything you've been through, you still had compassion to spare for someone else. That kind of grace is rare. Never lose it." They embraced again, and Margaret whispered in her ear, "Take care of my son-in-law. He's a good man, but he works too hard. And bring that beautiful daughter of yours to visit us sometime. Elizabeth would love to meet the child of the woman who brought her mother to her side." After Margaret left, Sarah sat alone at her table, staring at the envelope and trying to process what she'd just learned. Richard Coleman had known all along. He'd seen her help his wife's mother, and instead of simply thanking her, he'd changed her life. She returned to the office 20 minutes later, still in a daze. Richard's office door was open, and he looked up as she passed. "Sarah, do you have a minute?" She stepped inside. Richard was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city. "Margaret found you," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Yes, she told me everything. About Elizabeth. About why you were really at the station that night." Richard turned to face her. "I probably should have told you from the beginning, but I worried if you knew Margaret was my family, you might think the job offer was purely emotional gratitude, rather than recognition of genuine capability. I needed you to know I was hiring you because of who you are, not just because of what you did." "But it mattered," Sarah said. "What I did, it mattered because it was personal for you." "Of course it mattered. My wife was terrified before her surgery. Having her mother there, it gave her strength. You gave us that gift." Richard's expression grew serious. "But Sarah, I want to be very clear. That act of kindness opened the door, but your performance over these past 3 weeks has proven my instincts were right. You've exceeded every expectation. You've handled complex situations with grace and competence. You've earned your place here. Sarah felt tears threatened but held them back. Thank you for everything, for seeing something in me when I couldn't see it in myself. We all need someone to believe in us sometimes. Richard smiled. Now we have the Parker Industries meeting in 20 minutes. Are the contracts ready for review? On your desk, sir. 3 copies with the amendments highlighted in yellow. Excellent work. As Sarah returned to her desk, she tucked Margaret's envelope into her purse. Tonight, she'd take Emma out for a real dinner, not gas station crackers or dollar menu items, but a real meal at a real restaurant. They'd celebrate how far they'd come. But more than that, she'd start a savings account for Emma's future, because that's what this was really about. Not just surviving, but building something better, creating a life where Emma never had to count crackers or apologize for being hungry. Sarah Bennett had been given a second chance, and she was determined not to waste a single moment of it. 6 months into her position, Sarah faced her greatest challenge yet. It started with a phone call at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. Sarah was making Emma's lunch for school when her phone buzzed. Richard Coleman's name on the screen. Sarah, I need you at the office immediately. We have a major situation. She heard the tension in his voice. In 6 months, she'd never heard him sound like that. What happened? I'll explain when you get here. It's urgent. Sarah called Emma's school and arranged for the morning care program, then drove to Coleman Industries through rush-hour traffic, her heart pounding. When she arrived at Richard's office, she found him with 3 senior executives, Daniel Park from legal, Catherine White from finance, and Marcus Johnson from operations. All of them looked grim. Close the door, Richard said. Sarah did, then sat in the chair he indicated. Last night, our quality assurance system flagged a critical defect in one of our medical devices, the MC750 ventilator. The component that regulates oxygen flow has a manufacturing flaw. Under certain conditions, it could fail. Richard's face was ashen. We have 1,800 units in hospitals across 6 states. If this defect causes a malfunction, patients could die. Sarah felt cold. What do we need to do? We're initiating a voluntary recall. Every unit must be retrieved and replaced within 72 hours. It's going to be a logistical nightmare. Catherine leaned forward. We need to coordinate with hospitals, arrange emergency shipments of replacement units, manage the media response, and deal with potential legal liability. The company is facing its most serious crisis in 30 years. Richard looked at Sarah. I need you to manage the coordination center. You'll work with each department head to track every unit where it is, when it's being replaced, ensuring no gaps in patient care. It means working around the clock until this is resolved. I understand, Sarah said, though her mind was already racing. Around the clock meant she couldn't be home with Emma, meant asking neighbors for help, maybe sending Emma to the after-school program until late evening. But this was life and death. People were counting on them. What do you need me to do first? For the next 18 hours, Sarah didn't leave the office. She set up a command center in the large conference room with whiteboards tracking each unit, phones constantly ringing, and staff rotating in shifts. She created spreadsheets mapping every MC750 unit by hospital, established check-in protocols, coordinated with shipping companies for emergency transport of replacement units. At 9 p.m., she called Emma, who was at their neighbor Mrs. Chen's apartment. Hi, baby. I'm so sorry I'm not home yet. It's okay, Mama. Mrs. Chen made me dumplings. Are you still at work? Yes, sweetheart. We have an emergency, but I should be home by midnight. Is Mr. Coleman okay? Are you okay? Sarah felt her throat tighten. We're all okay. Just busy. Be good for Mrs. Chen, okay? I love you. Love you too, Mama. By midnight, they'd located and scheduled replacement for 1,643 of the 1,800 units. The remaining 157 were proving difficult rural hospitals, facilities with limited staff, complex logistics. Sarah was on her 43rd phone call of the day when Richard appeared beside her with a cup of coffee. You should go home. Get some sleep. We can continue in the morning. Not until we find all of them. Sarah took the coffee gratefully. We're down to 157. I'm not stopping until every patient is safe. Richard studied her face. You have a daughter waiting for you. I have a daughter who deserves to have a mother she can be proud of, a mother who doesn't walk away when things get hard. Sarah met his eyes. You taught me that. When you gave me this job, you showed me that character matters, that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, is what defines us. This is my chance to prove that lesson meant something." Richard was quiet for a moment. "Okay, but I'm staying too. We finished this together." By 4 a.m. Wednesday morning, they were down to 18 units. Sarah's eyes burned with exhaustion, and her fingers felt numb from typing, but she kept going. By 6 a.m., they found the last unit, a small hospital in rural Montana that hadn't responded to any calls because they'd been dealing with their own emergency. Sarah personally stayed on the line until they confirmed the unit would be replaced within 6 hours. "That's it," she said, slumping back in her chair. "All 1,800 units accounted for, replacement scheduled and confirmed." Around the conference room, the staff who'd worked through the night erupted in exhausted applause. Richard stood and addressed the room. "I want to thank every single person here. What you've accomplished in the last 24 hours is extraordinary. You may have saved lives tonight. Go home. Get some rest. You've earned it." As people filed out, Richard stopped Sarah. "Not you. One more thing." He led her to his office and gestured to the couch. "Sit." Sarah sank into the leather cushions, too tired to argue. Richard handed her an envelope. "Open it." Inside was a check for $10,000. "What is this?" "A bonus for exceptional performance under crisis conditions. And before you argue, this isn't just from me. The board approved it this morning. What you did over the last 24 hours saved this company from catastrophic damage, financial, legal, and most importantly, moral. You ensured no patient would come to harm because of our mistake." Sarah stared at the check, tears blurring her vision. $10,000, more money than she'd ever held in her life. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll go home and spend the day with your daughter. You've more than earned it." Sarah drove home as the sun rose over River City, exhausted but fulfilled in a way she'd never experienced before. She'd proven something to herself over the past 24 hours, that she was capable of handling pressure, of making crucial decisions, of being someone who could be counted on when it mattered most. She found Emma asleep on Mrs. Chen's couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Mrs. Carter." Chen insisted she didn't need to rush Emma off, but Sarah gently woke her daughter and carried her back to their apartment. "Mama?" Emma murmured sleepily. "Did you fix the emergency?" "Yes, baby. We fixed it. Everyone is safe. I knew you would. You always fix things." Sarah tucked Emma into bed and lay down beside her, holding her daughter close. Emma's absolute faith in her was both humbling and empowering. 6 months ago, Sarah had been at rock bottom, broke, desperate, giving away her last dollars because she couldn't bear to see someone else suffer. She thought that moment was the lowest point of her life. But now she understood. It had been something else entirely. It had been the moment she chose to remain human, despite losing everything, to stay compassionate when she had every reason to be bitter, to give when she had nothing left. And that moment had changed everything. Not because someone had been watching, not because it led to a reward, but because it revealed something fundamental about who she was, who she'd always been, even when life tried to break her. Sarah Bennett was a woman who helped others, who kept going when things were hard, who refused to let circumstances steal her humanity, and that was worth more than any job or salary could ever measure. 1 year after that night at the bus station, Sarah Bennett stood in the River City Community Center, watching Emma help distribute Thanksgiving meals to families in need. The center was packed with volunteers from Coleman Industries, a tradition Richard had started 15 years ago. Every Thanksgiving, the company closed early and staff spent the afternoon serving meals to anyone who needed one. Sarah had organized the entire event, coordinating with local food banks, scheduling volunteers, arranging transportation for elderly residents who couldn't make it to the center. It had taken weeks of planning, but seeing Emma's face light up as she handed a warm meal to a grateful mother with 3 children made every hour worthwhile. "Your daughter has your heart," a familiar voice said beside her. Sarah turned to find Margaret Reeves standing there with Elizabeth Coleman, Richard's wife. Elizabeth was fully recovered from her surgery, vibrant and healthy. The two women had become friends over the past year, meeting for lunch twice a month. "She sees you helping others," Margaret continued. "She learns from your example. That's the greatest gift a parent can give." Emma ran over, breathless with excitement. "Mama, Mrs. Moore, Rodriguez from my school is here with her family. Can I go help them? Of course, baby. I'll come with you. Sarah found Mrs. Water, Rodriguez Emma's beloved first-grade teacher, standing with her elderly father and her teenage son. The teacher's eyes were red-rimmed, her smile fragile. Mrs. Rodriguez, it's so good to see you. Sarah, I didn't expect. She trailed off, clearly fighting tears. My father's medical bills have been difficult. I shouldn't have come, but my son insisted we needed a proper Thanksgiving meal. Sarah understood that shame, the feeling of needing help when you are used to being self-sufficient. She'd lived it. I'm glad you're here. Let me get you settled at a table. She led them to a comfortable spot near the windows and made sure they had extra portions of everything. As she walked away, she felt Emma's hand slip into hers. Mama, why was Mrs. Rodriguez sad? Sometimes grown-ups go through hard times just like we did last year. Remember when we didn't have much money and stayed at the motel? Emma nodded solemnly. Before Mr. Coleman gave you the job. That's right. Mrs. Rodriguez is having a hard time now. So we help her, the way people helped us. Like you helped the old lady at the bus station? Sarah knelt down to Emma's level. Exactly like that. When we have enough, we share with people who don't, because someday they'll help someone else. That's how kindness spreads, like a circle, just like a circle. Later that evening, after the last family had been served and the cleanup was complete, Richard gathered all the volunteers. Before we head home to our own Thanksgiving celebrations, I want to share something. A year ago, I witnessed an act of extraordinary kindness. A woman with nothing gave her last dollars to help a stranger, my mother-in-law, get to my wife's bedside when she needed her most. That woman is here tonight. Sarah, would you come up here, please? Sarah's face burned as she walked to the front of the room, Emma trailing behind her. Sarah Bennett embodies everything this company stands for, Richard continued. Not just in her excellent work as my executive assistant, but in her character. She didn't help Margaret because she expected anything in return. She did it because it was right, even though it cost her dearly. That kind of integrity can't be taught in business school or learned from a manual. It comes from the heart. He turned to face Sarah directly. I hired you because I saw that heart. You've proven every day since that my faith was well placed. But more than that, you've inspired others, including me, to remember that success isn't just measured in profits or productivity. It's measured in how we treat people when no one is watching, and what we do when helping someone else requires sacrifice. Richard pulled an envelope from his pocket. The board and I have decided to establish the Sarah Bennett Compassion Fund program to help employees facing financial hardship, medical crises, or unexpected emergencies. Sarah will administer the fund, using her judgment to identify people who need help and deserve a second chance. The room erupted in applause. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. I don't deserve this, she whispered to Richard. Yes, you do. You gave when you had nothing. Now you can help others do the same. He handed her the envelope. The fund starts with $100,000. Use it to change lives. That night, Sarah sat with Emma on their couch in the apartment that no longer felt small. It felt like home, and talked about the day. Mama, Mr. Coleman said you helped someone when you were sad and had no money. Is that true? Yes, baby. We were very sad because Daddy had left and we didn't have much. But I met an old woman who needed help more than we did, so I helped her. Were you scared? Sarah thought about that night, about standing in the bus station with 97 cents left, watching the bus pull away with their last chance of escape, about not knowing where they'd sleep or how they'd eat. Yes, I was very scared. But you helped her anyway? Yes. Why? Sarah pulled Emma close. Because being kind is more important than being comfortable. Because sometimes the right thing is the hard thing. And because I wanted to be the kind of person you could be proud of, even when times were tough. Emma was quiet for a moment. I am proud of you, Mama. You're the best mama in the whole world. Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, the expensive kind, now, not the Motel dollar store brand. You know what I learned, baby. I learned that when we give from the heart, even when it hurts, even when we can barely afford it, somehow we end up receiving more than we gave, not because we deserve it or expect it, but because that's how kindness works. It creates a circle that keeps coming back around. Like you said at the center today. Exactly like that. Later, after Emma was asleep, Sarah sat at her small kitchen table with the envelope from Richard. She opened it to find details about the Compassion Fund and a letter. Dear Sarah, a year ago, you showed me something I'd forgotten in all my years of business success. That true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to remain compassionate when life has stripped away everything else. You were broken, desperate, and facing a future that must have seemed hopeless. But when you saw someone else in need, you didn't harden your heart. You didn't say, I have nothing to give. You gave anyway. That moment defined you. Not your circumstances, not your struggles, not your losses, but your choice to stay human when you had every reason to become bitter. This fund is about more than money. It's about recognizing that there are Sarah Bennett's all around us. Good people facing impossible situations, one crisis away from giving up. Your job is to find them and give them what I gave you. A chance. Not charity, but opportunity. Not pity, but belief. Change their lives the way I changed yours. And in doing so, remind them and yourself that no matter how dark things get, kindness always finds its way home. With deepest respect, Richard Coleman. Sarah folded the letter carefully and placed it in her journal, next to the pressed flower Emma had picked on their first day in the new apartment. She thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, about the shame in her eyes when she'd admitted needing help. Tomorrow, Sarah would quietly arrange for the medical bills to be paid from the Compassion Fund, not as charity but as a gift between friends, the way Margaret Reeves had insisted on repaying the bus ticket money, the way kindness demanded to be passed forward. Sarah opened her journal and wrote, 1 year ago today, I stood at a bus station with my last $23 and made a choice. I chose to help someone else instead of myself. I thought I was giving away my last hope. I was wrong. I was giving myself a future. I've learned that our darkest moments don't define us. Our choices in those moments do. That integrity matters more than comfort. That compassion is a strength, not a weakness. That sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what we're really made of. But most importantly, I've learned that kindness isn't a transaction. It's a legacy. We don't help others to get something back. We help them to create a world where helping matters, where one person's compassion sparks another's courage, where every act of kindness ripples outward, touching lives we'll never even know about. Margaret needed to get to her daughter. I helped her get there, but she also helped me get somewhere, not Portland, but somewhere far more important, to a place where I could believe in myself again, where Emma could grow up seeing that her mother never gave up on being good, even when life gave her every reason to. That's the real story. Not that I helped someone, but that helping someone saved me too. The circle continues. She closed the journal and turned off the kitchen light, checking once more on Emma before climbing into her own bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. People to help, problems to solve, lives to change. But tonight, Sarah Bennett slept peacefully, knowing that she'd found her purpose, not in success or salary or security, though those things mattered and she was grateful for them, but in the simple, powerful truth that had guided her through the darkest night of her life. When you give from the heart, even when you have nothing left to give, you discover that you had everything all along. You just had to be willing to share it. This story is about more than one woman helping another at a bus station. It's about the power of choosing compassion when life gives you every reason to choose bitterness. It's about staying human in inhuman circumstances. It's about understanding that our lowest moments can become our defining moments. Not because of what happens to us, but because of who we choose to be when everything falls apart. Sarah Bennett teaches us that integrity matters more than comfort. When she gave away her last money, Sarah chose to honor her values over her immediate needs. That choice revealed her character and ultimately changed her life. Hard times don't have to harden our hearts. Despite losing her husband, her baby, her home, and her security, Sarah remained capable of empathy and sacrifice. She refused to let circumstances steal her humanity. Kindness creates unexpected connections. Sarah had no way of knowing that the elderly woman she helped was connected to a man who would transform her life. But even if there had been no connection, her choice was still right. We help people because it's right, not because we expect rewards. Small acts of compassion can have enormous impacts. $23 doesn't sound like much, but to Margaret it was everything. And that act rippled outward, comforting Elizabeth during her surgery, inspiring Richard to offer Sarah a job, creating the compassion fund that would help countless others. Second chances are sacred. Richard Coleman didn't just give Sarah a job. He gave her dignity, purpose, and the chance to rebuild her life. When we're in a position to help someone, we are holding their future in our hands. That's a responsibility to take seriously. The circle of kindness continues. Sarah helped Margaret. Richard helped Sarah. Now Sarah helps others through the Compassion Fund. Each act of compassion inspires the next, creating an endless chain of grace. If you're watching this story from a place of struggle, know this: your circumstances don't define you. Your character does. Keep being kind even when life is cruel. Keep helping others even when you need help yourself. Keep believing that goodness matters, that integrity has value, that compassion is power. Because sometimes our darkest moments are just the beginning of our most beautiful chapters. And sometimes the person we help or the stranger who helps us is exactly the angel we needed all along. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and share it with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about faith, humanity, and the power of kindness. Leave a comment telling me, have you ever helped someone when you could barely help yourself? Or has someone helped you in a moment of desperate need? Your story might inspire someone else. Remember, kindness is never wasted, compassion is never foolish, and you are never too broken to make a difference. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep believing in the power of human goodness.